right, I'll call this meeting, regularly scheduled meeting to order. If you'll join in the salute to our nation's flag. Ready, begin. Good evening. Roll call and declaration of conflicts of interest, please.
Councilmember Abrams.
Here and none.
Councilmember Bixel.
Here and none.
Vice Mayor Franco.
Here and none.
Councilmember Moniz.
Here and none.
Mayor Bublak.
Here and none. Thank you. All right, we will go to the approval of agenda as posted or amended.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Abrams.
Yes.
Councilmember Bixel.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Franco.
Yes.
Councilmember Moniz.
Yes.
Mayor Bublak.
Yes, it passes 5-0. Thank you for that. And we have two presentations. We will start with adoptable pets. Who's got it?
Just wait. Just wait.
I know. Oh, man. Really?
Yeah, just wait.
You had to bring the biggest cutie pie, didn't you?
I'm Animal Services Supervisor Katie Walthrop. This is Norton. He's a 6-month-old Alaskan Malamute. He's an energetic dog that will reach anywhere from 75 to 95 pounds. He is toy and food motivated and very vocal. He is currently available for adoption at the Turlock Animal Shelter. I wanted to share some fun facts about the Alaskan Malamute breed. So the Malamute was named the official dog of the 49th state. They have a lifespan of 10 to 14 years. They do not bark much, but they're very vocal with their howling and very energetic, as I mentioned. They are a working dog breed that needs a lot of exercise. They are bred to be sled dogs, and it's a double-coated dog that does best in a colder environment. The Malamute was used during the gold rush in Alaska in 1896, hauling the miners' supplies on sleds. They were also used in both World War I and II. They helped bring supplies to the troops in France and perform search and rescue for missing soldiers. So if you're interested in adopting this amazing breed, you can visit us at the Turlock Animal Shelter. We're located at 801 South Walnut Road. We're open Tuesday through Saturday from 9:30 to 3:30. So this is Norton.
That's really unfair to follow that cute dog. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me here tonight. Tonight, I am going to be reading the proclamation for July is Parks and Recreation Month. Whereas Parks and Recreation are an integral part of communities throughout this country, including Turlock. And whereas Parks and Recreation promote health and wellness, improving the physical and mental health of people who live near parks. And whereas Parks and Recreation promote time spent in nature, which positively impacts mental health by increasing cognitive performance and well-being, and alleviating illnesses such as depression, attention deficit disorders, and Alzheimer's. And whereas Parks and Recreation encourage physical activities by providing space for popular sports, hiking trails, swimming pools, and many other activities designed to promote active lifestyles. And whereas Parks and Recreation are a leading provider of healthy meals, nutrition services, and education, and Parks and Recreation programming and education activities. And whereas Parks and Recreation increase a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas Parks and Recreation are fundamental in the environmental well-being of our community and are essential and adaptable infrastructure that makes our communities resilient in the face of natural disasters and climate change. And whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and Turlock recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources. Now therefore, I, Karen Packwood, on behalf of Mayor Amy Bublak and the entire City Council and all of our citizens, do hereby designate July as Parks and Recreation Month in the city of Turlock. So, thank you.
All right. Is Norton already taken? Did somebody already get him on the way out? Okay, so next we have public participation. This time set aside to discuss items not that are within our jurisdiction and not on the agenda. And so I do have some cards. Milt, you asked for a poll item 5C. I got you. Terry, you had requested to come up. You had two, right? Yes. Come on up. I took one away for you.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor, council members, and city staff. With amazement, I am stunned as I watch the plan move forward to create a community of container housing for the unhoused folks of Turlock. Of all the feedback from citizens here, there seems to be almost no support of the project, rather is being ridiculed. Will there be grocery stores, a free kitchen with 3 meals a day, schools, a church, a library, drug and mental health counseling on site, childcare, a bank, a day center, a gym to promote fitness, activities to participate in? In other words, will this become a healthy community? Maybe, but not that I know of. From all those who I've talked to in Turlock, people who work with and who know the unhoused who live here, our street folks are not interested in moving there. There will be screenings to get in, and there will be rules to be followed and complied with. If Turlock folks are not interested, where will the inhabitants come from? Merced, Modesto, Stanislaus County lists? Will they be referred here from jails and prisons upon release? Who will monitor for those who need counseling about drug addiction and or mental issues? I have a question here. How many inhabitants are being planned for in this community? Approximately.
We'll answer the questions after.
Okay.
Just go ahead.
My gut feeling is it'll become very much like Moe's in Modesto a few years ago. Well-intentioned, but eventually a shambles and a failure with the campers scattered back into the community. What then will become the abandoned units that have been constructed for this purpose? What could be done with them then? This $9 million project is not the answer. Perhaps the money is best spent by providing counseling and mental health and substance abuse services living within an institution to folks in need. Thank you.
That was the only card I had filled out. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in public comment? Milt?
Yes, good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, and Turlock citizens. Milt Treeweiler. Yes, we just had a very interesting meeting in this room. I'm sorry that the people who are here now are not able to attend it, but it was a discussion of our housing numbers, which maybe a lot of people don't understand, but it's very important that we actually participate in this. At current, the only people I believe that are participating in it or have so far, at least the majority, are architects and developers, and unfortunately the only developers in our area are knowledgeable of single-family dwellings. So it kind of restrains what kind of housing we can have here to solve our housing problems. I don't know where we got the architects and builders who built all the current multi-story structures we have in Turlock, but we've got a lot of them out there by the university. And it's an opportunity because, first of all, it puts houses at reach for the people. The expense of living in an apartment or a condo, buying a condo, is much less than a single-family development. And it makes it practical for people, first-time people, younger people, older people, to have a place to live. And that demographic is being ignored. Or is not being taken care of like it should be taken care of. One other thing that was kind of interesting at this past meeting was there were areas that were defined as areas of high pollution, and the diagrams are totally ridiculous because pollutants don't stop at blocks and in squares. When we had the fires over in the Del Porto Canyon, I can remember the smoke falling all over Turlock regardless of where you were living. So I don't know who dreamt up that. It didn't seem very realistic. I did like the comment that the reason low-income people are more affected by these materials is the fact that they have to open up their windows in the daytime. The people who have air conditioning, of course, are closed and they can buy air filters and other things. Well, the rest of us, I do have an air conditioner. It's a window air conditioner. I do also open my windows in the morning, but the air quality is pretty good in the morning. I close them at night. They're closed in the afternoon. So anyway, it's very important that all citizens participate in these housing numbers, and we need to get it out so we can have meetings where it's accessible to the majority of the citizens of Turlock. Thank you.
Good evening, council members, mayor, and members of the public. I missed the earlier meeting, but housing is one of the things that we really need to address, because housing is still out of reach for many people, especially younger people, low income and working class people, and people are living on Social Security and retirement. It's just getting out of hand, and the only choices that we have is apartments or single family housing, and it's still out of reach because rent is too high and mortgage is too expensive, because it's almost like $500,000 to buy a single family home. And I told this in previous councils that there is a lot of empty land, especially the land near Monte Vista Crossings. That's the perfect opportunity to build mixed and affordable housing, as well as duplexes, townhouses, apartments, condos in that area, so people can live and also go shopping within reach without having to drive from the other side of town or going to Modesto and elsewhere for their shopping. Because having houses near shopping centers, as well as places, industries, places of work, people will most likely stay here in Turlock, contribute to the economy, and not having to worry about driving all the way to the Bay Area or somewhere far away from Turlock, because that's where everything is. But now, as Milton Treewire explained it, we need to consider the alternatives, because having two choices is not enough for people of Turlock. Having more choices, because the demographics are changing, and this is not like back in the old days where having families is common. People are now either single or living in couple and not having kids. They need to look for a house, but they need something affordable and decent, so they'll be living and staying and not having to worry about paying high rent or mortgage. So we need to consider looking at alternatives to housing, building multi-story housing, condos, duplexes, townhouses, so that Turlock will grow, prosper, and that we could create more jobs, especially the high-paying jobs, industry jobs, especially it's coming up from Stanislaus 2030, and as well as building more stores, shopping centers, so that people will not have to travel elsewhere or far away. People will just stay in Turlock, contribute to the local economy, and not having to worry about losing people. And that's all I have to say for this 3-minute comment. Thank you.
Anyone else? Supervisor Chiesa, nothing? You want to talk about the fair? Anything? Okay. All right, I'm going to close public comment and bring it back. Motion waiving reading of all ordinances on the agenda except by title.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Will you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Abram?
Yes.
Councilmember Bixel?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Franco?
Yes.
Councilmember Moniz?
Yes.
Mayor Bublak?
Yes, passes 5-0. Thank you for that. Consent item C is to be pulled. There is a green sheet for item I, Ida. Are there any others? If not,
Motion to approve is amended.
second. Motion and a second. Will you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Abram?
Yes.
Councilmember Vixel?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Franco?
Yes.
Councilmember Moniz?
Yes.
Mayor Bublak?
Yes, passes 5-0. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and open item C to the public first. Milt, would you come up and ask your question, sir?
Yes, Mayor, Council, staff, and Turlock citizens, the local emergency proclamation. Pursuant to California Government Code Section 8680, a local emergency is a condition of extreme peril to persons or property proclaimed as such by the governing body of the local agency affected by a national or man-made disaster. The purpose of a local emergency proclamation is to provide extraordinary police powers, immunity for emergency actions, authorize issuance of orders and regulations, alleviate pre-established emergency provisions, and is a prerequisite for requesting state and federal assistance. A local emergency proclamation can only be issued by a governing body, a city or county, or an official designated by local ordinance. Deadlines regarding these: issuance within 10 days after the actual occurrence of a disaster if assistance will be requested through California Disaster Action Act. Ratification: if issued by officials designated by ordinance, must be ratified by governing body within 7 days, Government Code Section 8630B. So all those requirements were fulfilled 2 years ago. Renewal. This is the renewal part. Reviewed at least every 60 days by the governing body until terminated. Next item, termination. At the earliest possible date that conditions warrant. Government Code Section 8630D. The governing body shall review the needs for continuing the local emergency at regularly scheduled city council meetings at least once every 60 days until the governing body terminates the local emergency at the earliest possible date that conditions warrant. Earliest possible date. Please let us know. Please let the city citizens and myself know what is the reason for this. I mean, there's no longer an emergency. The homeless encampments are gone. The COVID pandemic has ended. What is the reason for this proclamation? Please let us know why Turlock still needs this. City Manager Wilson, Captain Pacheco, and Deputy City Manager Sarah Eddy. The homeless issue will be with us for 5, 10, 20 years from now. It's not going to go away, and it will only get worse as the city continues to grow. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak regarding this every 60-day appointment of a emergency? Okay, we'll close the public comment and bring it back. Mr. Petrolakis?
I wasn't on the list to answer, but I'm happy to answer.
Okay.
It's very simple. I mean, it's a flexible local tool, and we have it in place. I feel like I've answered this question now more than once, I believe. So it is in place because under the local emergency, we were able to give one of our local shelters additional capacity. And so that's why it's in place. So it's certainly within the discretion of the council to end it whenever they like, but that additional capacity will be also ended with the removal of the emergency and the rules that were promulgated under the emergency. And also, it was after the encampment crisis was addressed. This was a separate emergency that was declared about just the continuing unsheltered homeless, not the encampments.
Thank you. Did you have something to say?
Motion to approve 5C.
Motion?
Second.
And second. And call the roll, please.
Councilmember Abram?
Yes.
Councilmember Vixel?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Franco?
Yes.
Councilmember Moniz?
Yes.
Mayor Bublak?
Yes. This passes with 5-0. Final readings, there are none. Moving on to public hearings, 7A. and it's introduction of TMC on garbage recyclable materials and organic waste to change the process of adoption of a maximum solid. I'm just gonna stop there. Thank you. We did.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, citizens. My name is Juan Tejeda, Regulatory Affairs Manager for the city. For the next agenda item 7A and 8B, I would like to introduce Garth Schultz. He's the president of R3 Consulting Group. He has nearly 2 decades of solid waste management experience in both the private and public sector. His team was contracted by the city to help with the solid waste municipal code changes and franchise agreement. And turn it over to you.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, staff, and public. My name again is Garth Schultz, R3 Consulting Group. I was before the council just a little bit over a year ago for your 5-year rate adoption for Turlock Scavenger. Thank you so much. And I have just a short presentation today covering both the items recommended by staff on items 7A and 8B. Brief background, we'll cover the municipal code amendments first, the amended and restated agreement with Turlock Scavenger, and then the recommended actions of the council. So you may already be aware, Turlock Scavenger is your franchised exclusive hauler of solid waste, recyclables, and organics here in the city, and has been for 76 years. I did the math. It's been quite some time. They have an agreement that was originally initiated. The current existing agreement was initiated in 1991. It has a current expiration date coming up in 2036, but there are amendments and restatements recommended, and we'll cover that on a slide. The key precipitating factor for those amendments and restatement being necessary was that 5-year rate study that the council voted to approve in February last year. During that process, it was I'll cover it in my next slide, but it was uncovered that Turlock Scavenger, because rates had not been adjusted in some time, was not making a profit, and in order to phase in rate adjustments to the public, there was agreement between the city and Turlock Scavenger to amend and restate the agreement and change certain terms and conditions. And associated with that recommendation is also a set of recommendations to amend the municipal code, and I'll just jump right into those. And in the specific sections of the municipal code that are recommended for change are those governing solid waste and recycling rates and policy. One key change is a change to adopt rates by resolution of the council rather than ordinance. It's more common throughout the state to adopt rates by resolution, and you still have a very public process for the adoption of your rates. If you recall, last time the council approved rates after a 45-day protest notice and public hearing process. So though this change is recommended, it doesn't change public's awareness and ability to come forward and voice their concerns or comments or protests to future rate adjustments. You still have a public process in place. It just means that for the council, rather than a 3-step process, you'd be in a 2-step process and not having to do a 2-ordinance read. So this would effectively strip the rates from being in the municipal code, but it would still be part of the franchise agreement with Turlock Scavenger, and then also clearly posted on the city's website for public awareness and education. Another change that's recommended, the municipal code presently details limitations on the length of a franchise agreement or a license with a franchised hauler for your solid waste and recycling and organic materials. In order to approve the new term that is recommended and was previously negotiated with Turlock Scavenger, you would need to revise that and delete that section of the code. 2 other final items, fairly small overall in terms of their level of edits in the draft that's before you in your packet this evening. One is effectively providing Turlock Scavenger the right to self-help as directed by the Chief of Police. Sorry, this says Chief of Policy, that's a typo. Chief of Police may direct Turlock Scavenger to collect and impound illegally placed containers within the city limits, those by other unlicensed haulers not approved by the city for those activities. So rather than that burden being on city staff or city contractors, Turlock Scavenger would take that on, and again, in a right to self-help type way. It helps protect their interests. And then there's minor other clarifications in the recommended revisions to align the ways in which solid waste types are referenced with state code, your other ordinance adoptions that you made for SB 1383 a couple years back, and then also with the new franchise agreement. So a limited overall set of changes. The key ones to be aware of are the removal of the rates from the ordinance. You'd be adopting those by resolution going forward, and the removal of that limitation on the term length. From there, the city did, in late 2021 and leading up to the 2022 rate adoptions, agreed with Turlock Scavenger to come forward with an amendment and restatement of the agreement. As I stated on the prior slide, the current agreement was typed on a typewriter in 1991, is 21 pages long and misses some of the enhancements to terms and conditions and industry standards that are common in such agreements these days. But more importantly, in order to smooth in the rate adjustments to residents, there was this agreement around other terms and conditions. So when the council approved those rates, that was part of the packet. You were made aware of some of these recommended changes moving forward. And those were a 20-year renewable term, which means that in every given year that the agreement takes place, that a year would be added to the end of the term, but the city and Turlock Scavenger would still retain the right to terminate that renewable provision just upon 90 days written notice. But given that you've had a long-term relationship with Turlock Scavenger as your local family hauler, dating back 70 years, and an interest in continuing with their quality of service and low comparative rates into the future, this was the recommended and a negotiated outcome in common in circumstances like you have here in the city. The second bullet here, this annual refuse rate index, effectively this is a CPI-like adjustment to the rates each year. When we briefed the council in 2022 around this outcome, we also highlighted that it's common for rates to be adjusted on an annual basis virtually in all such arrangements throughout the state. Prior to last year, their rates had not been adjusted in some time, which led to a bit of a spike in rates. One of the ways in which these agreements avoid those spikes is just to adjust rates on a year-to-year basis. It's not based on costs. It would be based on a series of market indexes. So a CPI for labor, a CPI for fuel, a CPI for truck maintenance. So it's approximating the change in their costs of operations given the major source of cost centers that they have. So that would be an annual process going forward. There is also a provision that would allow for a detailed rate review or a cost-based look periodically, not every year, one in 2027 at the end of your current 5-year rate set that you're implementing as a city, and then periodically thereafter, if called on by either Turlock Scavenger or the city, both parties would have the right to say, we want to look at the costs of operation in order to determine what our rates would be going forward. Also, both of these, the RRI and the detailed rate review mechanisms, provisions are very common in other agreements throughout the state and have been reviewed both by us and outside counsel to the city that specializes in solid waste franchise agreements such as those before you this evening. And then finally, just a host of updates and modernization to meet current regulatory standards, current industry standards, best practices for these operations. Turlock Scavenger has done a great job as your hauler, and we've heard that in public testimony in the past. But it's also beneficial to make sure that the expectations you have of a good, reputable operator are reflected in the agreement, and that's the reason you're going from a 20-page agreement to a 100-page agreement with this change. And believe it or not, they can be 300 pages long. So we didn't go overboard with this one. So those are the primary kind of summary of the updates to the agreement, the recommendations for amendment and restatement. There is another reason to consider staff's recommendation for approval of the amended and restated agreement, which is that the city is on a corrective action plan with the state agency CalRecycle around implementation of SB 1383, which is the organics recycling law. And that's not to say you're doing anything wrong. Many state agencies throughout the state are on those corrective action plans, and that's primarily having to do with an alternative time frame for implementation. However, in order to keep on that time frame, the city does need to secure key services, which Turlock Scavenger has agreed to provide. So rather than the city doing things like inspection of containers for contamination, route audits, and other activities which are a better fit for them as the hauler and operator, you're delegating that responsibility and the duty to them. But you do, and your staff is looking forward to next week, proving to CalRecycle that has been accomplished so that you stay on pace and on schedule with the terms and conditions and requirements of that corrective action plan. So to summarize and wrap up, the public hearing is for the introduction and first reading of the ordinance amending Chapter 6.3, Article 1. Staff recommends approval, R3 as your consultant recommends approval, and it is also necessary for your action, recommended action on item 8B. And then item 8B, of course, is approving the amended and restated agreement with Turlock Scavenger. And that would both fulfill the terms that were negotiated between the city and Turlock Scavenger leading up to the 2022 rate adoption last year, and also fulfill the obligations under the corrective action plan. That's it for the presentation. Happy to take any questions you might have.
Questions for Mr. Schultz?
I do, thank you. And just, we're only doing 7A right now, right?
Yes.
8B will come back. Okay. Well then, regarding the ordinance, it's a small part in there, but I'm just curious if either you or city staff or someone can speak to like the scope of the problem with unlicensed haulers and kind of what we're seeing and what the effect of this sort of self-help remedy that you have there
Yeah,
would be.
excellent question. I would have to defer to staff or Turlock Scavenger, and I imagine they may want to make comment on this item as well. I'm not personally aware of those.
The questions before we ask Scavenger to come up? All right, let's,
Great. Thank you
before
so
we
much.
open it to the public, Alan, do you know the answer?
Of course he does.
Well, you're asking how many problems have we had with this issue?
Yeah, just kind of what's going on out there that's you're seeing that requires this change in the ordinance.
In the past, and especially when we were first starting to talk about the contracts and stuff, I just went through 4 pictures over a 2-month period of illegal containers being in the city of Turlock. And this goes way back, because it always bothered me that Turlock Scavenger always, obviously, does its billing through the city, so the city gets its franchise fees. And I had talked to people in the city that, hey, are you getting your fair share from this address? Did you get anything from this address? You have drop boxes in here, and no, we didn't even know they were there. And so for a long time, I just stopped. Obviously, nothing was being done about it, and I'm sorry if it's that way, but if the city's doesn't care about getting its franchise fee, I do, and what happens with that, I don't know what these people charge or whatever, but obviously they could undercut my prices because I've got to come up with a franchise fee inclusive into our billing. So in this when we did the rate increase, obviously that rate had gone up, and my opinion is that once people start realizing that, especially out of town haulers, they'll come in and probably undercut maybe what I am enough to get in here and charge it. So originally also when we came up with our rate adjustment for the change, that was all part of how much you charge for residential, commercial, and industrial. And obviously, if you start taking away the income on one part, that affects the other parts. Not that I can raise them because they're already set, but it definitely affects any profitability that we're gonna have, so. Like I said, I don't think it's that unusual. City of Modesto, I know they have the same thing. They have an exclusive, they have two haulers, but they have an exclusive, and they both haul the same rate. Their rates are set, and that's what it is, so. I don't think we're asking for anything else, and my point is if there are illegal coming in, that, I have no problem that if, the city had said, tow this thing away. I've got room to tow it and store it also, so.
It's an enforcement mechanism.
Yeah, exactly. Okay,
Any other questions for Ms. Margaret?
thank you.
Thank you. All right, it's open to the public now. Is there anyone wishing to speak regarding this item? Anybody want to talk garbage? Okay, let's close the public comment and bring it back.
Motion to approve 7A.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Abram?
Yes.
Councilmember Bixill?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Franco?
Yes.
Councilmember Moniz?
Yes.
Mayor Bublak?
Yes, passes 5-0. Thank you. Item B, it says Hedden, but I just don't think that's you. Let's do it, Captain. Oh, wow. Strike three. Oh, super excited.
All right, good evening, everyone, mayor, members of council, public. What you guys have before you today is a request to renew the Turlock Municipal Code 4-19-107 regarding the city's military equipment policy and ordinance. Additionally, before you today is the 2022 Annual Military Equipment Report, which is required to be presented to you on an annual basis per Assembly Bill 481 that was passed in 2021. So some changes that happened over this past year that we added to it. If you look under the unmanned aerial vehicle, essentially our drones, we had a very specific description of our drones in there. What we did is we just made that very basic, so it didn't limit us to basically only being able to buy one. Same exact thing for our unmanned ground vehicle. That's simply our robot. We made it very, very specific. Now it's generic. So essentially, if you guys have had time to review that, I'm just here to answer any questions from council or the public that they have regarding this annual update.
Thank you. Any questions?
I have a question, just maybe sort of on behalf of the public. Can you, for the public that may not have read the whole chapter here, can you explain a little bit about what is considered military equipment and what is not, and what the delineation is?
Yeah, so there's some things that are similar to what the military uses, and there are things that the military just does not use that Assembly Bill 481 said that's military equipment. So some things that includes, if I can just jump over real quick, that includes our drones, unmanned aerial vehicles, our robots, ground unmanned vehicles. It applies to our command vehicle. It applies to some of the equipment that our SWAT team uses, so like our 40 millimeter less lethal launchers, the ammunition that goes towards that, or less lethal 12 gauge launchers and the munitions that go to that. And then the launchers that utilize like our chemical agents, those launchers as well, then the canisters as well. And that about sums it up. We don't have a whole lot of quote military equipment, but that's about it right there.
All right, let's open it to the public. Anyone wishing to speak regarding this item? Close the public hearing and bring it back.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will you call the roll?
Councilmember Abram?
Yes.
Councilmember Bixill?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Franco?
Yes.
Councilmember Moniz?
Yes.
Mayor Bublak?
Yes, passes 5-0. Thank you. All right, item C. This is going to be a little bit of Quintero and Zelnick. Chief, well, for a second, he's leaving us. No title.
Good evening again, Mayor, Council, members of the public. The item before you tonight is a proposed amendment to the safety element of the general plan. in order to adopt the Stanislaus County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan, as well as the Local Hazard Mitigation Plan, the annex that is specific to the city of Turlock, and any subsequent revisions to these plans. It is required by FEMA that these hazard mitigation plans are updated every 5 years, and adoption of the hazard mitigation plan into the general plan then ensures that if the city of Turlock was to experience some type of hazard or activity that qualified, then we would be eligible for up to 100% reimbursement from the OES. If it is not adopted as part of the general plan, then you're only eligible for up to 75% reimbursement in the event of some type of event. For Turlock specifically, there were 3 areas that were identified as potential hazard that were dam incidents, drought, and extreme heat. And then as you heard in the housing element presentation, this is really kind of the first step in updating our safety element. With the adoption of this plan, there will be some other items that will follow to ensure that that component of the general plan is in compliance. But this is a big first step in that amendment to adopt this plan by reference. And I'm happy to answer any questions, as well as Chief Jelnick.
I do. And Chief Jelnick, this probably goes to you, but any other department head might be involved here. On the last 2 pages of the City of Turlock Annex has our basically mitigation action plan. So different areas where we can influence policy as it relates to particularly, drought and extreme heat. Dam incidents are probably out of our scope a little bit. But I'm just curious if you or any other directors can comment on where are our areas of biggest opportunity that we can influence the policy to make sure that our residents are safe and protected and prepared for things like drought and extreme heat as this 10-day forecast is coming ahead of us.
That's a great question. So I would have to defer the specifics on the drought plan to other areas of staff, although combining the surface water project with groundwater is a huge step in the right direction to build resiliency into our community, and that certainly is noted within the plan. I think my response to your question is more of a broader approach of how public safety can deliver services both during crisis mode and following with recovery. And I think this is an opportunity where we lean in not just to the resources that are available throughout Stanislaus County, and our efforts towards regionalization are certainly helpful in that effect. Our ability to stand up our own countywide incident management team is a huge step in the right direction, and we just began work on that over the last year. But also within the state of California, we have one of the best, widely regarded as one of the best mutual aid systems in the entire world. Something to be very proud of. We've had a lot of practice and experience with wildland incidents, but it applies to other forms of natural and man-made disasters. And so the good news within the report is that Turlock is a relatively disaster resilient community, though many of the other potential hazards that we could face are referenced within the base plan that's hosted at the county level. And so for the specifics for drought, if you would like more information on that, I'll have to deflect on that response. But I think we're continuing to improve and build ourselves into a better position to respond to those disasters in our community. You're welcome.
Okay, no other questions? Let's open it to the public. Anyone wishing to speak regarding no disasters here?
Yeah, on this plan, I was wondering if we all know of Lac Mégantic in Quebec, as well as East Palestine, Ohio. Is there a plan involving getting disaster plan involving train developments, especially with chemicals and oil? Because that's, even though it rarely happens, this is kind of worries a lot of people nowadays. Is there a plan into this plan involving preparedness for train-related incidents with chemicals?
Sure.
Hang on. We'll go ahead and finish the public comment stuff. And then Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, let's close the public comment, and now, please.
Okay. I think we're all a little concerned about train derailments, and my response is very similar to my response for Councilmember Abram, and that is that, through regionalized efforts, through cooperation with allied agencies and the key stakeholders, UP, our countywide hazardous materials plan team, as well as the ability to stand up additional teams statewide and bring the resources into our community that are needed to resolve the issue. It's an opportunity to utilize the skills that we've been trained to do for a lot of years, and our incident management team could support those efforts as well.
Thank you for that. And then Congressman Duarte sits on the transportation thing, so we have him right on call if something were to happen, and so that's helpful too, because sometimes the railroad doesn't listen to us, but they listen to the Congress. Any other questions, comments, or what is the desire here?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have motion, 2 seconds. Will you call the roll?
Councilmember Abram?
Yes.
Councilmember Pixel?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Franco?
Yes.
Councilmember Moniz?
Yes.
Mayor Bublak?
Yes, passes 5-0. Thank you for that. All right, action items. 8A, approving the updated 5-year capital improvement program. Mr. Fremming. Is there congratulations? Did you have a baby? Good job.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I should probably speak into this.
There you
That's
go.
probably better.
There you go.
All right, well, good evening. This evening, the action item before you is approval of the City of Turlock 5-year capital improvement program update. This is for the fiscal year 23-24 to fiscal year 27-28 timeframe. So the CIP, it's something that engineering works on a regular basis. As you know, we bring items to you for approval of various contracts for construction improvements within the city. The capital improvement program is a 5-year outlook of projects that are needed to maintain quality of life here in the city of Turlock. We use the CIP as a means to manage and coordinate project priorities, timing, location, and resources. The CIP should be guided by the general plan and applicable master plans or specific plans. So why does the city need a CIP? It is required per Government Code Section 65103, stating each planning agency shall perform all the following functions: annually review the capital improvement program of the city or county and the local public works projects of other local agencies for their consistency with the general plan pursuant to Article 7. So the CIP is a listing of projects, and if you've looked at the packet, there are hundreds of pages of projects that we're anticipating to happen in the future, and it's an opportunity we take with the departments to reach out to them and ask them what their needs are for improvement, and then we put together the CIP to help us plan our efforts. It should be viewed as a blueprint that goes hand in hand with the budgeting process and with helping to prioritize those needs and staff resources. Okay, so there's 122 separate projects with an estimated cost of $187 million and change, and they fall into one of the following work categories listed here: fire, police, information technology, streets and signals, water, wastewater, sewer, storm drain, parks and community facilities, airport, and transit. So these projects are listed by staff as being necessary, though the actual delivery of each project is based on prioritization and clearly allocation of resources. Not all projects listed in the CIP will be delivered as scheduled. The CIP, in a way, functions as a bit of a wish list, helping identify needs and prioritizing those needs within a 5-year plan. But the budgeting and the planning, application of grants, all that goes into whether or not a project will be delivered as scheduled in the CIP. So that's why we have the update regularly, where we try to refocus and see if there's any tweaks that we need to make to the schedule, or if a project is no longer relevant, if it needs to come off the CIP completely. So what does the CIP look like? It's an Excel table with several different detail sheets that follow it. It identifies which work area within the city the project falls. It's financial information, when we believe over the 5-year period that we'll be expensing for those various projects, until it's delivered. This is a public document, and upon approval, it'll be uploaded to the city's website, available for anyone who would like to view it. So this is just an example of a detail sheet that shows up in this CIP. It identifies a particular project, its work area, a brief description, an image or two if available, a justification statement for why the project's needed, and then it gets into some estimates for its costs for the various phases as the project progresses from preliminary design all the way through construction, and then the timeline that we're anticipating for the project. Okay, so the projects that need to be included in the CIP are those that are categorized as public projects, public works projects, and that's defined as any project that includes the construction, reconstruction, erection, alteration, renovation, improvement, demolition, and repair work involving any publicly owned, leased, or operated facility, or painting or repainting of any publicly owned, leased, or operated facility. And then there are several different categories where it's not deemed a public works project, it's more maintenance work. That includes those that include routine, recurring, usual work, minor repainting, resurfacing of streets and highways of less than 1 inch, and landscape maintenance. Okay, I don't actually have the CIP itself is rather large document, so I couldn't actually page through it, but in your packet you should have it, and I hope you've taken an opportunity to look through that a little bit. So, and I apologize, this was written first for the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission did approve this on June 1st, 2023, to be in conformance with the city's general plan. And so tonight, the action again is, requested action is for City Council approval of the CIP, and then upon that approval, the document would be then uploaded to the city's website and available for all to see. And with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Furman? Okay, let's open it to the public. Mill?
This is kind of an offshoot to what you just stated. I drive around town, I see people running red lights, and I think it's terrible. That's because part of this is a signal. Well, I was coming down Canal, driving, I just crossed the railroad track. I was coming down Canal to to cross Golden State. And lo and behold, when I got very close to the crosswalk, the light was yellow. And I just thought, well, I'd go right through it because that light was like, choo, choo, and I was going through a red light. And I'm complaining about people running red lights, and I was running a red light. And I felt really bad about it. But I mean, I went over there again, and it's the same thing. The light goes, choo, choo, and it's done. It's like 2 seconds. And, you know, and then I go to another part of town, and the light will be 5 seconds. It seems even too long. So I know we just set out an agreement. We approved an agreement with some facility or some contractor who is going to take care of this, but how does a citizen get this information to them? I also know there's another issue on West Main Street, driving into town from the west. When you get to North Sodaquist to make a left-hand turn, the lighting, the actual light container with the lights in it is off center so that it doesn't show the green arrow. You have to look across the street over here. I use that quite a bit, so I see it, but I see a lot of mishaps there. And actually one day when I was walking, the company that's doing our repair work in that area was there, and I said, hey, well, you know, the wind was blowing really, really hard just before we had a 40-mile wind storm, you know, and it really did tilt that thing. And I said, well, you're right here. They were working on the northeast corner light. I don't know if they were replacing one of the lamps or whatever, but I said, can't you straighten out this? The wind is, and nothing's been done. So what do I do to make sure the city is aware of the fact that we have lights in town that are doing things that are not normal and creating problems for people? So could you fill me in on that? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak regarding this?
Yeah, also I agree with Mr. Treeweiler, and also I've completed this a couple of times.
on Main Street, it's special on Main Street and Golden State Boulevard and all the way to Golden State Boulevard and Olive Avenue. The traffic lights do not reflect very well with the flow of traffic, especially if you got one intersection that's red, but the other intersection is green, and then that lines up all the cars. And once the lights switches, a lot of people are panicking and frustrated and honking the horns. That creates a situation where an accident's going to happen. And also on Crane and Tor Avenue, because I usually frequent Lamo, there are no stop signs on Crane Street, but there's one on Tor Street, because every time I cross that intersection driving, I had to stop and look if there's any cars, because there are cars blocking, on the other side, and that does not give me visibility. And also, I've talked about this, that on some major intersections now, they need to have a left green light on, because when you have just solid green, people are going to be panicking and fidgeting, and they'll try to find a way to go to the left turn, but there are other traffic outside and people are not going to respect. That's why there's so many accidents happening on Turlock. So how are we going to, as a city, how are we going to respond to this issue? Because it's growing right now, but our traffic lights are like stuck in like 25 years.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll close public comment. Synchronization, how to communication with the public. What do you got?
Yeah, so I'll just say that my work area is with capital projects, like new projects. Projects that are past projects and something's happened with the signal or something's not working correctly. We do work with the Municipal Services Department handles those. I believe they're the ones who manage that contract that Mr. Treeweiler referred to with St. Francis Electric, who, they're to go around our signals on a regular basis and check things such as the signal heads, make sure they're working properly, et cetera. So I believe that the Municipal Services Department, they're happy to receive phone calls, emails. I think there's a web form that you can fill out to submit a traffic signal complaint or problem. So I encourage you to look on the website, and maybe staff from Municipal Services, if they're aware, can answer that directly. As concerns the left turns that the second gentleman mentioned, we are trying to, with our new projects, install signals that have a dedicated left turn phase where we have space for it, rather than rely solely on traffic to yield, what's called a permissive movement. So that's something we're doing for new signals. And as we have the opportunity, as engineering judgment dictates, we sometimes do retrofit projects to add left turn signals where possible.
Great, thank you. Comments?
Just a comment. I was just out of the state, and the state I was in had a left turn yellow flashing. So that's something we may want to consider if possible. It just brings to your mind, take care when you're turning.
Is that a motion?
No, just comment.
Did you have a motion?
Yeah, motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Abram?
Yes.
Councilmember Pixel?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Franco?
Yes.
Councilmember Moniz?
Yes.
Mayor Bublak?
Yes, passes 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Fleming, and congratulations again. All right. Action 8B. This is the secondary garbage.
Good evening again, Honorable Mayor, council members, members of the community. This is action item 8B, approving the amended and restated agreement number 2024-12 between the City of Turlock and Turlock Scavenger for solid waste handling services effective July 1st, 2023, necessary to meet the terms and conditions of the 5-year solid waste study approved by the City Council February 22nd, 2022, and to fulfill the city's SB 1383 corrective action plan with the State of California. As our recommended action is by our consultant to approve this item, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Questions?
All right, yes, Mr. Tejeda, I sent you some of these questions before, so But I'm hoping that you can speak a little bit to the labels that are on some of our, at least my black can, the new black cans that came out, that say this goes in, this doesn't go in. I am curious if you can tell us more about when we can expect all the cans to have that throughout the city, because I think that's a great way to communicate with people when they are putting their trash in their bin.
Yes, in my recent communication with our hauler, Turlock Scavenger, they said they're trying their best. They have an inventory shortage, but they hope to be all completed by 2030. That's the date by Cal Recycle.
And one last question that might seem a little bit tangential, but this is the time to talk trash, right, on our end of it. So I mentioned to you before, I've gotten some constituent questions about now that we are, moving to comply with this state requirement to separate organics, and these constituents want to put food scraps in their green can, but are concerned about pests and what else that's attracting and odors as we have our summer heat. And I noticed in the CAP, help me out with what that.
Corrective action plan.
Corrective action plan, thank you so much. Mentioned something about, potentially having biodegradable bags or something like that. Can and either of you speak to if that's potentially in the future to make it easier for everyone to put yucky stuff in their green can?
And maybe this is a question for Turlock Scavenger, but in discussions with Alan's son, Jesse, they say they're working on it, and I'm misunderstood that they maybe have a biodegradable bag that may be put in the green container bag or green container bin.
Welcome back.
We belong to a few different associations. One of them is the California Compost Council. They are, I'll say it, very green. I mean, they really want compost to work and try to educate. And the problem I have with it, and I'm not the composter. We will pick up the green cart and we work with composters. Their biggest issue with that is you see these bags that talk about compostable and all that, and they are not. Or if they are, they don't break down the right way that they break down. We've always pushed right now is no plastic bags, whether they say compostable or not. I don't want them in the blue can. I don't want them in the green can. The reason being the blue can. That material we use, we have actually two companies that we work with. They have what I call the big blue machines. These things are probably in the tens of millions of dollars to put these systems in. The plastic bags are the problem that they have these screens, they're big tumblers. It all gets tied up into these tumblers, and it takes them every day, and some of them I've talked with that they have to do it twice a day. Actually get into those machines and people with knives and cutting the plastic out of these rollers. So it's very time sensitive. I would love to see, all plastics 100% recycled, but it all becomes a problem. So back to your question, maybe about green. The food waste can be composted, but as of now, I understand, the concept of the smell and those things, but that's why Turlock is, ever since we put automation in back in '72, our whole goal was the garbage can, the blue can, the green can, all go out same day as the garbage pickup day, and all three get picked up. No confusion what day, what week do we go, when a lot of other cities have gone and still do every other week. And I think you're going to find out, I know one particular city.
North of us?
they
Tonight?
found out that they went with blue 1 week, green 1 week. They're now, I don't know if they've changed it yet,
I
but
think it's
they're,
tonight.
is that what it is? Yeah. So I think we've always been ahead of the game. I like to think, with the backing of Turlock. I'll give you just a real short history. Back when we were looking at automation, I looked at it back in the 80s, and that didn't happen. So then when we made the proposal back in 91, this was the proposal of going with 3 cans, the colors, and at that time, I was told from the city that, my comment is that we're coming from the old living in a cave, coming out to the space shuttle. I was told that Turlock was probably, as far as they knew, one of the first in the nation to actually do the 3 carts 3 times a week, the right colors. Didn't make sense to me when they did these different colors, but obviously blue and green were the right ones. And we went with it and said it's going to be picked up every week on the garbage day. So actually Turlock, I got to go back now and look at the plaque. Turlock and Turlock Scavenger got an award quite a few years ago. I had to fly to Wisconsin to receive the award, and very proud of it. But it just said that we were, I think even at that time, there was only like about 7 different companies or cities that was doing it that way. So anyway, one correction was, and Garth made correction, but I'm also proud of it. The first contract was in 47. My grandfather came into this company in 1935. So I am 3rd generation, and Jess and Darren and my nephew, they're 4th generation. So we're very proud of that, very proud of the tradition. And again, we serve Turlock, and that's what we do. So anyway, I hope I answered your question.
You did, thank you, I appreciate
I
it.
added a little more.
Thanks, yes, no, I appreciate your business's forward-thinking ways.
And you guys were the general, or the grand marshal in the Christmas parade. How many cities do that, right? With garbage leads. All right, let me open it to the public. Anyone wishing to speak regarding this? Bill?
Yes, I agree with what was just said. We were the first city to have the 3 garbage cans, and I always have been proud of that. But I'm a little bit troubled by the fact that Councilmember Abram brought up the fact that the signage really does help on the cans. And I know in my neighborhood, 50% of the people speak Spanish, and obviously sometimes I have to help them out as to what should go where, which I don't mind doing. But then when I heard you say that this will be corrected by 2030, that's a long time ago. I thought, well, wait a minute, was I hearing that incorrectly? But anyway, and again, it would be an expensive endeavor. I don't even know how you could find public funding to do it, because all the garbage cans are at the houses. You'd have to go house to house to figure out, put these new labeling on the cans. But still, it is a necessity. It would be really good to have that. So if that could be worked out with some kind of public funding, federal or state funding in the waste area, it would be good to do that for everybody. Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh,
I don't know if this is the answer to this, but also, at least on the ones that do have the tags on the can, there is what they call that QR code. And if they go to that takes you directly to the website. They can also go to the website and take a look at it, and it does list. I know there's probably people who don't have a computer even, whatever. But one of the things that we will try and do, which we will, as we do these inspections, which I don't think people are going to be real happy about, I don't think. But as we do that, we can try and start labeling the ones without the labels. There is what they said, a law that by a certain period of time, they have to be labeled, and also any new containers that do go out due to wear and tear on the containers, and anything new has a label on those. So it's kind of a slow process, but some of these old containers that are out there, they've been out there for quite a while, and they are starting to deteriorate a little bit.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, I had mine for
tell me.
forever. Probably 12 years.
Yeah.
Are we going to get the labels in English, Spanish? Do we have to request them?
They are not at this moment. The
Just
labels.
English only?
But will
that-
the QR code go to
The
different?
QR code, I believe, is where they can go to Spanish or English.
Okay.
So,
Thank
all right.
you.
If I can just piggyback on that, page, 88, 89. It was addressing Vice Mayor's question, just they're very pictorial on those labels, so.
Nice.
English is not absolutely necessary for that, but yes, let's get back to public.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Open the public, yes?
Well, as for the garbage, I think we need to start, educating back to the basics, because nowadays kids are learning which to throw away the garbage and which correct can. Because I still remember that poster back in the 90s about which garbage can go and which can. Talking about the good old green, blue, and black cans of all the picture type of garbage goes in which can. We should bring that poster back again and let the public know which garbage, which one goes to can, which one does not. But with, pictures, lists of which items can go, as well as having like a public education campaign to let residents know which garbage can go into and which can fits best for the garbage. Because as far as we know, California is getting really strict, and I've seen some cities where they do inspections and they see the wrong garbage in the wrong garbage can. They'll slap the homeowner with fines, and that will not make people happy. But with education and awareness, there'll be less chances of having inspections and more people putting the garbage in the right can. So that will make California happy. And that's why we had to start educating, informing, and announcing the public before California put more regulations in garbage.
Anyone else?
I have a page of guidelines, and I don't know where I got it. It must have come in the mail with some billings, and it's got pictures and exact requirements of what goes in which bins, what can and can't go in each bin, and I have it taped to my kitchen cabinet door, and it's on Spanish in the back. In Spanish on the back, and I have a neighbor who calls me and says, "Terry, can hoses go in this one?" So I said, "Would you like a copy of the sheet I keep?" And she says, "No, thanks. I'll just call you every time I have a question."
So everybody's calling you. I got it.
Yeah, I got it.
Anyone else? Okay, let's close the public comment and bring it back. What is the will?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Abram?
Yes.
Councilmember Pixel?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Franco?
Yes.
Councilmember Moniz?
Yes.
Mayor Bublak?
Yes, passes 5-0. Thank you. Item C. This is the reoccurrence of the Consortium annual plan.
Good evening again, Mayor, Council, and members of the public. The item before you is bringing back the proposed amendment to the annual action plan. We've made some modifications to the plan in response to the council comments at the last meeting for consideration. So again, what is proposed is an amendment to the adopted annual action plan for the 22-23 fiscal year. The annual action plan determines the project categories for CDBG and home funding for how they will be spent during that fiscal year. The annual action plan must coincide with the adopted consolidated plan. We are currently operating under the 2020 to 2025 consolidated plan. These are the 6 goals that have been identified in the consolidated plan that we must comply with. So the item before council tonight really has 2 separate areas that are proposed for consideration for amendment. The first portion of the amendment looks to increase the consortium home funding an additional $1,730,311. And this is being done to address the determination from HUD that the city of Turlock had to remain the lead of the home consortium until to the 23-24 fiscal year. So the plan that was adopted by council for the 22-23 annual action plan did not include this allocation because at that time the city of Turlock had given notice and HUD had approved the change in the lead, and so that was how we moved forward with adopting that plan, and that allocation was to be addressed with Stanislaus County as the lead. After the plans were submitted and reviewed by HUD, HUD determined, although they had told us that that was accepted and adopted, that it could not be done and that we had to remain the lead 1 more year. It would have to go back and amend the plan for the consortium to get this allocation. And so this would be the final amendment for the time for Turlock to be the lead for the consortium. So the home consortium amendment, I'll get into more detail what we're proposing to amend, but is being done to be able to incorporate that additional $1.7 million funding for the home consortium. The second portion is proposed to amend the CDBG project allocation, and this is primarily being done in order to propose an option for the additional funding that is needed to complete the Turlock Gospel Mission Day Center. And I'll go into more detail on the specifics of what the proposed amendment on CDBG is to meet that need. Moving forward, effective July 1st, the expenditures out of the home and CDBG funds will be dictated by the 23-24 annual action plan. So this is just amending these items, but then moving forward, we have the plan that has been approved and in place that will guide those other expenditures moving forward throughout the year. So again, for the home amendment, this is being done to add in that approximately $1.7 million allocation into the home funds. The plan that was brought forward last time proposed to put $1,297,733 into the affordable housing category. In response to council's comments, what is being proposed tonight, and we can look to move if there are different project categories that are eligible. But what is being proposed now is to put that $1.2 million into the residential rehabilitation category. This category would be loans and grants, or a combination of loans and grants for homeowner residential rehabilitation projects. The city has typically funded those through CDBG. In the 23-24 CDBG annual action plan, council we did allocate $900,000 into the homeowner rehab project, so there is that CDBG funding there moving forward. This would, if approved, would add additional funding into homeowner rehabs. If this was approved by council, then to move this forward, we would work to get out a big public education campaign, looking at, door hangers, social media, press release, to let the public know that this funding is available for those that are income qualified. And so this could fund re-roofing houses, window changes for efficiency, adding, replacing air conditioning units, making rehabilitation upgrades to properties for those that are income qualified, that helps retain that affordable housing stocks. It makes repairs that are needed to preserve the housing stock for the owners that are in those homes. The other category, we are required that 15% of the home allocation go to a community housing development organization, or a CHODO by short. And so for this fiscal year's allocation, we would need to increase that category by the $259,547 for the 15% to meet that requirement. And then the third proposed category, 10% of the allocation can go towards administration costs. And so we are proposing to put that 10% of the total allocation into the administration category to fund the operation of and implementation of these programs. So that, really explains what the home amendments are per the citizen participation plan. Again, we can move between these categories if there is council desire to fund other eligible areas, as long as we don't completely remove a category or add something new. Again, the adoption of this annual action plan, if not adopted and submitted to HUD, then the Home Consortium would lose that $1,700,000 allocation for the 22-23 fiscal year. So the next portion of this amendment that is proposed is looking at our CDBG funding source. And this is being proposed in that the project at the Turlock Gospel Mission Day Center, construction was started. There was demolition done inside the building, and as part of when the work went on, it was discovered that the trusses in the building could not be repaired. They needed to be replaced. It was also not in the original scope, but was, when going through the plan check process, identified that fire sprinklers were required for the building due to the occupancy type of being an assembly use with the day center. And so that added the trenching for fire line, as well as the installation of fire sprinklers. The building code, due to the timing of the project when the plans were approved, the code requirements changed for the type of ducting for the HVAC. So that added an additional $50,000 to the project to have to go to hard ducting. So we are proposing to use CDBG funds to complete the work that is needed. There is approximately $380,000 of work to complete the project that has been identified. And so we are asking to allocate $400,000 into the public improvement category in order to be able to complete that project. We have been asked if there is a need for 2 day centers, and with the day center just starting as a pilot for WeCare. I did get word today from WeCare that the day center opened on June 7th. They have seen 76 unduplicated clients, and in total have already had 376 people utilizing the day center during the time that they are open. They have had the county there, and so the county and the filling out the VSPDET forms has said that it is some of the highest number of people that they've been able to get to serve, as well as the Legacy Health Mobile Clinic is also working with the day center, and it has also been the highest number of people that they've been able to serve in their partnership there. They have already been able to connect some people to employment through the connections at that day center. So WeCare will come and give an update to the council, but that was very exciting information for a pilot that we weren't really sure exactly what the impact would be. Also, in speaking to representatives from the Gospel Mission, do see that the 2 day centers would serve different needs. The Gospel Mission Day Center would be open to people under the age of 18, which the We Care Center is not, as was discussed with council. The Gospel Mission also has the ability to accommodate people that have pets. And so, there is a feeling that the 2 centers would operate and serve different client needs. So in order to increase the public improvement category by $400,000, we would need to look at the plan and the allocation, and that funding has to move from other project categories. And being that we are at the end of the fiscal year and proposing this amendment, we know what areas we have already made expenditures out of and where there is funding that wasn't utilized and could be a possibility to propose for consideration. So the first project category, we're looking in the housing rehabilitation category. $900,000 was allocated. We are proposing to decrease that by $335,000. We have completed at least one project, so we've expended about $40,000 in this category. But by reducing this category for this fiscal year, it does not take away from any housing rehab projects that are in the pipeline, and that in the 23-24 annual action plan, another $900,000 was allocated. And if the home amendment is approved, that would be a new $1.2 million for housing rehabs that could be done in loans and grants to do improvements for homeowners. The temporary relocation category, we did not have any housing rehabilitation projects that required a need to temporarily relocate anyone. So this would be if there was rehab work that was being done that a resident needed to be placed somewhere else for a temporary amount of time. We haven't had any projects this year that required that, and so we're proposing to remove that $5,000 allocation to go towards the public improvement category. The public service emergency payment, the $60,000 that was designated to this public service. This was a new public service that was proposed last year or this fiscal year for rent, mortgage, utility, and working with the agencies that provide rent, utility, mortgage. They had other funding sources that were available in the Turlock area that they were expending, and so felt that our allocation, they would not have been able to have spent it within this last fiscal year. We have in the 23-24 adopted plan, $80,000 was allocated for rent, mortgage, utility. A notice of funding was sent out. The CDBG Grant Selection Committee reviewed the 2 applications that came in and have made a recommendation and contract. So if those are signed and approved or in for consideration in the city manager's office, that will be ready to be implemented starting July 1st. So the public service category, we are limited in CDBG that we can only allocate 15% of our annual CDBG allocation and our prior year's program income. And so even if this item was left with the $60,000 in the public service, because we're at the end of the fiscal year, this funding would not go towards rent, mortgage, utility. It would just not be expended. What would be is the $80,000 that has already been approved and we're moving forward with in the 23-24 annual action plan. And that ends my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
So, Ms. Quintero, when COVID hit and people stopped paying their bills, and we couldn't use HUD monies or anything like that to offset the millions of dollars that we lost for them not paying utility, wouldn't this have been an efficient way to kind of like get us back a little bit of the funding by providing people who aren't paying it this money and then they pay us? Wouldn't that have been helpful?
Yes, and that's, when looking what the program will look to do, we'll have an outside agency look to qualify people. There will have to be criteria that are met, and so CHSS is the organization that has been working and doing that. And even the city utilities with the other types of funding sources they have were eligible items at that time too. So
Did we promote it at all?
We didn't have CHSS under contract for the public service for this item. We prior had the CDBG CV funds that were for rent, mortgage, utility. That was pushed out, and it was not used as widely as was anticipated because in the CV funding there had to be a COVID link to why the payments were not being made, and many people couldn't provide that or show that or qualify.
Questions?
Yes, regarding the Turlock Gospel Mission project, $330,000 of federal funds has already gone into that project. Can you explain a little bit about what will happen if it stays in its current state and is deemed a failed project?
Sure. So there were HEAP funding that was put towards the project, and so $330,000 was allocated. The majority of that has been expended for the demo work and the construction work that has been done up to now. And so if the project isn't completed and up and operating as a day center, then at some point it will be monitored, and that would be a failed project that then that $330,000 would have to be repaid from a non-federal source.
Which would mean our general fund, right?
Or
somewhere else.
Potentially. It could-
Non-federal, but that's
Not other HUD
usually
funding
what
could not be utilized for that.
And then I apologize for asking you to repeat yourself, but because of the HUD timelines regarding this amendment, in terms of the home funds, if we can't have an amendment that passes this council tonight, that $1.7 million is lost for the consortium, for Turlock and all the other cities.
That is, yes, my understanding from our HUD rep. They're looking if there's any ability for any extensions, but as of this time, they said they need the plan submitted, a plan submitted.
So we've spent $330,000 so far. They're asking for another, I mean, we're saying we're gonna need another $400,000. When does it stop?
This should be the final scope that is needed. The plans are approved that have identified the entire scope of the project, the demo that's been done, everything that should be uncovered should have been uncovered. This has been bid by a contractor, the contractor that started. So this should be the amount needed to completely finish the scope of work that's needed to update the building.
Maybe it would help if you could give a detailed explanation as to what happened with the gospel mission. I know we've had staff working on this that underestimated it originally. There's been plan changes. There's been maybe a little more detailed explanation would help.
Sure. Yeah, the original scope that was identified did not include fire sprinklers, and it did not include the costs of trenching to put in water lines, replacing.
What year was that?
Sewer lines. I will have to look back to 2019, I believe.
So go ahead, finish your.
Sure. And some of this is what I'm putting together from looking back at records. I was not part of the original, part of the project, and staff that is not here. So, but in the scope of work of what is needed to complete, for whatever reason, the original scope did not include the cost of fire sprinklers. So that's trenching in a fire line, that's the cost of plans for fire sprinklers, the installation of the fire sprinklers. That was not included originally. And the restrooms is what was needed to comply with ADAs, now needed to actually be about a 240 square foot addition to the building to be able to accommodate what was needed in the restroom. So the original scope of work was not correct. It didn't have all of the items that were needed to fully bring the building up to code. Once demo was started before plans were approved. And so then once the building plans were approved, that identified, obviously, going through plan check, what all of the code requirements were to renovate the building.
I'm sorry, did you say the demo happened before a permit?
A demo permit was issued, so you can go in and start demoing, but before the plans were approved for the construction that was needed. So I think it was believed that the scope of work was understood based on the work write-up, but until you get through plan check and have full approved construction drawings, that's when you really know what your full scope of work is, so.
And the contractor hadn't bid out the full scope of work because the plans weren't all approved yet.
Correct.
Okay, what happens with the no vote, with the 1.7? We don't get it, or it's delayed?
So, yeah, with a no vote as of now, according to HUD, we would lose the allocation. Our HUD rep has said they were asking if there are possibilities for any type of extension. I would say that if council wanted to approve the amendment to the home, but not to CDBG, you could accept the home amendment and not the CDBG amendment. If there is a different desire for how home is to be expended between the categories, council could move between those eligible project categories as long as one is not eliminated or a new project category added. That would be allowable within the scope of the citizen participation plan.
Would that trigger the need to go back to the public and redo all the meetings and
If you're moving between eligible items and not completely eliminating a category or adding something that was not in the previous plan, it does not require going back out for home. The CDBG thresholds are a little different. If we were to want to make adjustments with that, then that would potentially need to go back out. But you could choose to not adopt the CDBG amendment and just adopt the home or vice versa if that was council's desire.
This question's probably for Attorney Petrolakis. Lucky you. So we have a no vote tonight. Hypothetically. And we lose the $1.7 million. What does that do for the other cities? Because I know there are at least 3 that are planning on utilizing some of those monies. Does that leave us in a position that we would be precariously perched on a ledge?
Without actually knowing, it kind of sounds like it. How's that for an answer? I wouldn't recommend it as a course of action because it's not, if it was just us and we wanted to take the hit for our city,
right?
And take the consequences of it.
Okay.
But here in the role as the consortium lead, we have responsibilities. I want to be careful how I say this.
No, I understand.
We have many stakeholders we should consider.
Correct.
And so,
sounds good.
Yeah. Okay.
Then also with the Turlock Gospel Mission, similar question: if that were a potentially no vote, how would that affect the city of Turlock?
That's interesting. I mean, I haven't dug deeply into this, but I think I know enough to know that there were certainly how do I want to put this? You know, I've been here long enough where, you know, it's like everything's going to be my fault now or, you know, soon in the future. But, you know, this was done by, you know, staff that's no longer here.
Correct.
There were some really unfortunate turn of events early on in the conceiving of the project and how it was done that sort of led to this little bit of a cascading effect. So I think that I'm not answering your question on purpose
Oh, I understand.
about Turlock Gospel
but
Mission. So
Okay.
I think it's
It's a similar.
well, it's just, you know, it's just an unfortunate situation, and I think staff's done as good a job as is possible under really kind of not ideal facts to figure out how to fix a problem, and you know, that's what you have before you, and you know, people thought about it. I don't think there's any other way to address it other than general fund money, which isn't ideal,
Right.
right?
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, one more. The 23-24 plan, we've already submitted that, correct?
Correct.
So we would have to amend that if we do anything different, such as the items that we've said that we wanted to do with, you know, more helping more people with rental assistance, helping more people with rehabilitation loans, and possibly doing grants instead of loans, because we do grants for nonprofits. I don't understand why we wouldn't want to consider doing grants for citizens. They're, you know, every bit as, you know, deserving as a nonprofit. So would we have to do another amendment?
So for the home, we would need to amend the 23-24. If council's direction was to approve this amendment tonight, that puts that $1.2 million allocation into the homeowner rehabs. That is something that is an amendment that can be done administratively. And so we would make that amendment to follow council's direction tonight. So yes, it would need to be amended. It could be done administratively to carry through this change for the 22-23 for the citizen participation plan. It would fall in that category that could be done without going back through a formal amendment process. For CDBG, if this amendment was approved, this would designate the $400,000 for that public improvement project specifically. And so there would be no amendment needed for the 23-24 plan because this funding was already there, and we would move forward with CDBG as expenditures as what was approved in that plan. For public service type projects, for home, it is not an eligible type of project like it is under CDBG for the public service grants. And so that has already been approved in CDBG. There, as we're coming closer to, well, as we end this fiscal year, we know more what our program income is. When we start the plan in CDBG, we have to estimate, and that 15% of what we can put towards public services is also based on our program income. So what we can do if the rent, mortgage, utility is moving and is there need for more funding in the fiscal year, and we close out this fiscal year and see if there is additional funding from that program income where we could increase our public services, then that is an amendment that we could bring forward to council.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Do I get a turn?
You have a question? Yes.
I have several questions. Ms. Katie, so if the contract price is $380,000, why are we being asked to allocate $400,000?
For a contingency
TGM.
to make sure that, you know, everything is covered, but we.
So we never have to come back again.
Well, but that's exactly what we're doing right now. And so I'm bothered by the part where if this project doesn't get completed, then somebody has to return to the money to that federal funding source, correct? So Turlock Gospel Mission has no liability in that?
Not for the I don't know.
Right, we don't. And most likely it would come out of the city's general fund, right?
Typically, yes.
So if we do this again and we allocate another $400,000 and it doesn't go this time, now the city's on the hook for double or nothing.
Yeah, potentially.
Okay, so at the last meeting that we talked about this, Turlock Gospel's tax status was questioned. What do we know about that today?
And looking at the IRS website, they are listed as being in good standing as a nonprofit that is eligible to operate as a nonprofit agency. So they had posted tax returns up through 2020.
But none for 2021 or 2022?
Correct.
And what about our CT one at the Attorney General?
I'm not.
It's their annual charitable trust registry. Okay, so we don't know anything about that. Do we know who's on the board at Turlock Gospel Mission?
Not the complete board, no.
We don't have that information.
We do not.
Can we have $100,000 allocated in the CDBG setup for the senior center?
Yes.
$400,000 for TGM. Could we flip the $400,000 and give $500,000 to the senior center?
If there were eligible projects at the senior center, yes, that would be a public facility that could be used for CDBG funding.
Do you think there are?
We're working with
Because we have a lot of seniors in this town.
Yeah, we're working with Parks and Rec to look at bringing back a separate proposal for council to consider using CDBG CV funding for additional upgrades at the senior center. So yes, we are actively working with Public Works on additional upgrades to the senior center, and we're proposing, going to bring forward for consideration a different funding source for that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Mr. Petrolakis, do you have anything to say?
Was afraid of, no, if that's the question, no. I mean, this is far from an ideal situation, as has been outlined, and I think that this is kind of out of my lane, but we did get some information that the one day center, both day centers are meant to augment current emergency shelters that don't have a daytime capacity. So it's been my position the whole time that enhancing those with daytime capacity is really important for all the reasons I've bored you and the public in a unsatisfactory manner many times, but it really helps us from many points of view. So that's what you're left with on this. And so I think the things you point out are right. I mean, if we spend more money and it's a failed project, yeah, you've doubled the failed project. All I can say is at least I have confidence in, what's currently going on here, that I don't think that would happen, but it is a risk that should be considered in the decision-making. But, if we don't do anything about it, then we know that it'll probably be a failed project, and we will be in the middle of a number of stakeholders, which include the other cities and the Turlock Gospel Mission, that I would find an uncomfortable place to be.
Anybody else have questions?
Can we start enforcing, if we have both of these daycare centers open, can we start enforcing our municipal code with no camping during the day, no loitering, no storage on sidewalks? Can we ask people to go to the day center, and if they don't go, can we say you can't do the things that are against our code?
Anybody?
Somebody.
Well,
So great that went to the police department.
well, I'll let Captain Pacheco respond more directly, but the answer is yes. That gives the police department more tools by which to move people off the streets, by giving them an alternative place to go, by enforcing the no camping laws.
Let me give my answer, so maybe, what's that? Well, his is good, but again, I like full disclosure on these things, which is, we are working on a comprehensive approach that assumes the availability of both day centers. Let me put it that way. So it
Did you want
It
to
makes
pass
it
it
a lot
over to
better.
the lieutenant, or you?
Excuse me, from the police department's perspective, obviously we work with the city attorney. It's a sliding scale, right? I don't think any of the cases that I've read, there's a bright line of if this happens, then everything immediately is enforceable with no risk inherent to the city. So with 2 operating day centers, it shows an increased capacity. We'd work with the city attorney. Obviously, if he felt comfortable in enforcing, the big one would be the camping
the
ordinance.
answer in
Then
advance.
of course, yes, we would do that. With 2 day centers operating at capacity, we would feel more secure with that, showing that we don't just have the thresholds at night. With the emergency that we just extended again, we have that capacity currently, but during the day, it's not there to the level of comfort that the city attorney or the police department would share. And that's not the only ordinance, right? There's also the shopping cart ordinance. There's all kinds of ordinances that the court have kind of looked at that said they are related issues, but just not as bright line as the camping. So again, not a complete answer, but there is no black and white answer in this area. And just from the police department's perspective, I think it's important to note that even if we start enforcing these things, it's not a number one cure-all because we don't just take them to jail. So I just want it to be known that none of these things in of themselves is a fix. That they're all tools for what that's worth.
One last question for Director Quintero. For the proposed day center at Turlock Gospel Mission, you highlighted some of the differences there, that youth would be served, that people with pets would be served. When the We Care Center came to this council, there was some concern about the operating hours and the days and things like that. Do we know anything about how Turlock Gospel Mission's plans of operation will deviate or, mirror what we see with the first?
In talking to a representative from the Gospel Mission, the day center previously operated 7:30 in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. They're looking at probably similar types of hours. They, at one point, had operated a day center 7 days a week. There were requests from the immediate neighborhood to cease the weekend operation. And so in conversation is something that the Gospel Mission sounds that they would be potentially willing to be open 7 days a week. I should add that if this amendment is approved tonight for the CDBG, then an item would come back to council for actual agreements between the city of Turlock and the Turlock Gospel Mission for the CDBG funds. Within that agreement, we would work to ensure there are some protections potentially for the city and would establish some of the operational expectations. But in preliminary conversation, there was a willingness potentially to go to 7 days a week and hours 7:30 to 6 potentially.
All right, let's open it to the public.
Good evening. My name is Thomas Hall. I actually work at the Turlock Gospel Mission. I am the Shelter and Outreach Supervisor. Some of those questions I just want to briefly answer real quick. As far as the serving hours, it would be around the same as what we have operated in the past. In the past, it looked like 7 a.m. to about 6 p.m., possibly 7 p.m. And it would be the same, and it's to offset, when people check out of shelters in the morning, they can go to the day center. When the day center is closed, they can check into the shelters in the evening. So that way, at all hours of the day, they have somewhere to be. And then as far as the camping issue, that's one of our biggest things, especially with our neighbors. Even just on the way here, just coming down the street, I saw someone that I'm going back to work right now that I'm going to go talk to that person. But we work with our neighbors as well as best we can with the police department to ensure that that doesn't happen. And then in ways that we try to prevent that, we offer storage services that can deter the cluttering on the streets in neighborhoods. And then also we look to outreach and get our people actually in the shelters and encourage them to take further advantage of the services that we offer as far as case management. But I just also have a statement here for our organization that I just want to say that the Turlock Gospel Mission is proud of the innovative programs and services that we have grown out of this relationship with the city of Turlock. And some of those projects, our day center that we had, as well as our day center that we had, as well as our storage for our guests that we offer. And Turlock Gospel Mission and the city have partnered to offer individuals who receive city ordinance violations community service and connectivity to social services and resources in lieu of jail and fines. In the city's diversion program, the Turlock Gospel Mission has worked with the city to develop coordinate operations, large emergency shelter that we, with the Stanislaus County Fairgrounds during the pandemic to provide alternative to the large dangerous encampments that were across the city at the time. And the Turlock Gospel Mission, like I said, is currently working to further provide and expand our service of property storage with our residents experiencing homelessness. And we're excited to continue working with the city in any way to provide high quality life-saving services for our community. And as far as questions or comments, I'm available at all times.
I
Thank you.
actually have a question for you.
Yes.
Back in the day, we gave the money for for everyone who wanted during the day to drop off their stuff. You just said your guests could have storage.
When I say guests, I mean our clients, and that basically refers to any client that comes for services, that would come for meals, that would come for storage, that would come for anything. If they come for an ID voucher, that's what I
But
refer
if
to.
they only just wanted during the day to drop that off and they don't do anything else with you, they would still be allowed to do it every day.
We encourage shelter, but they can still store stuff.
But every day they can come in, drop it off, and then pick it up.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for him? Next person,
Thank you.
Hello, Madam Mayor, fellow council members, city attorney, city manager, Vito Chiesa, Stanislaus County Supervisor. I'm here to amplify what I've heard here tonight. Typically, I think Mr. Petrolakis is talking about staying in his lane, and I'm the same way. I typically don't come up here, but today I'm gonna talk with urgency. I think the county's taking over in 4 days as lead of the home consortium. Right now, we have 3 days to apply for this money or we're gonna lose it. I agree, the county agrees with what conversation Mrs. Quintero has had with HUD, that the money will be lost. Do I think there's any liability from the other cities? No, but I can assure you there's gonna be a bunch of disappointment. There are hundreds of millions of dollars of need in this community for low-income housing, low-income residents. And I know this is a drop in the bucket, but it's an important drop in the bucket. And so, again, the urgency of this vote on the home consortium, I'm not speaking to the other component. It buys you a couple more years to go back and adjust if you want to move money around within it. So, again, I'm urging you to vote on it tonight. I think this will go a long ways, again, in keeping the faith of the 8 cities as well as the county. And Modesto is excluded, just for the public. Modesto is excluded from this consortium. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the council. This is special for the city attorney and maybe the manager and the young lady. You have a lot of violations in this report, a lot. I don't want to start in the mission gospel because it's already you guys questioning the legality and the same time what the funds was doing and what happened before. But the point is that you are the responsible. No matter what happened before, you're still responsible regard to the gospel. And the gospel is not doing a good job. Simple as that. The administration is failing and not doing a good job. Doing a good job to working with the people around, but administratively and accountability, not doing. So you're taking money from some place to please, they want to say that gospel. That's wrong. especially in the CDBG funds and home funds. In regard to the second issue, you are violating the public comment 30 days. Under the amendment, you have to have that. You have to have the 30 days from today, give it 30 days to the public to make comment and review your proposal. You did that in April 9 of 2022. In that 30 days, and put it in the newspaper in English and Spanish. But was to the May 10, 2020, not today. So you're violating the public comment under the amendment review of this proposal. The other one is you are violating the 13-166 limit English proficiency. This documentation has to be in English and Spanish or other language of the community. Over 5% is the mandate and the federal state guidelines. You're not doing that. The other one is 13-985. In regard to any federal funds, you have to have racial, ethnicity, and inclusionary part. That's not happening right now. The other one is the $1,700,000 in 371. That's supposed to present to the public under the public comment. You agree or disagree? Any comment from the community, it has to be before you approve anything tonight. But I'm sure you're going to do it because somebody already told you, you have to do it, we lose the money. So it scares you in that sense, but it's not true. Madam Chair, we're going to send a letter to HUD to questioning and at the same time to complain of this false. Thank you.
Chris?
Mayor Blue Black, council members, my name is Chris Curiaco, and I've been involved with the Turlock Gospel Mission over the years in little ways. And so I'd just like to talk a little bit about some of the questions I heard. Right now, the mission is running at about 85% capacity on overnight. And so we provide a lot of services to a lot of people. During the daytime, and this is where the day center comes in, we're running 30 to 50 people per day is what we handle there. And what do? We help get them on the road to getting into off of homelessness, out of homelessness, and back into being a productive member of society. So what the day center does for us is give us more capacity to handle that 30 to 50. And those people either end up in the nighttime shelter overnight, which we have a capacity of 80, and that's running at about 85%. And so what the improvements to the day center are, it makes that a more usable building. And of course, there's a change of code, as was mentioned earlier. There was a change of code that kind of impacted the cost in a major way. So we'd like to get this done, and I know by talking to the executive director that he has pushed to try to cause the contractor to get the work done, to move things along. So we're looking forward to having the support of the council in finishing up this project. And I think at this point, we know what all of the open questions are. So from a construction standpoint, this should do it. I can stand here and say that I'm a volunteer, but I know from the executive director that he's pretty assured that we can get this thing done. So I hope that I can answer if there are any questions. I hope that I can come back to you on an individual basis and talk to you a little about more in detail and introduce you to some of the staff so that you have a more higher comfort level with what we're doing here. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Anyone else? All right, let's close the public comment and bring it back for some dialogue. First, the questions that were asked about violations, administration, all those types of things. Are we going to be having to go back out for public for everything? Are we going to lose our HUD money anyway for not having done it?
So the substantial amendment that is before you does require public notice. That was done. It was noticed in the newspaper. It was sent out. I met with the HUD rep to understand what other obligations we had to make sure that we were compliant, and they directed that really what we've done by coming to the next council meeting has really been extended that 30-day comment period. So we re-noticed again in the paper per HUD's direction, an extension of the comment period. And so we are in compliance with the 30-day notice, out, review, and requirement for public comment.
In the paper, was it just English or English and Spanish?
English and Spanish.
Okay.
Yes, we always post in both.
And then I guess either Mr. Wilson or Mr. Petrolakis, there was some comment about administratively issues or something.
Well, I didn't understand what he meant by administrative issues, but I would make the assumption that what he means is that we're not doing our job from an administrative perspective.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. All right, some conversation?
Yeah, this is, the part of this is the consortium money, and so from that standpoint, we're responsible to the other cities, and funds they're expecting, and I know I've heard from 3 of them, because I'm on the Shaw Committee. 3 of them are planning on using it, so, Turlock took on this responsibility many, many years ago, and we should finish it well. We have a next step with the 23-24 monies that we can adjust and do as we choose to do. Unfortunately, with decisions that have been made in the past, they weren't always well thought out. We had staff that didn't always know what they were looking at. I think we had a staff member that wasn't familiar with construction, and so when he did an estimate, he did it based on probably a housing instead of a commercial building. And then when you dig into construction, you don't always know what's below the ground. Well, our pipes are old in that area. We have to deal with that. We deal with that when we tear up a road. I think we need to move forward on this and not just get stuck on the fact that it isn't exactly what we want, because the alternative of us losing the 1.7 million and then being responsible to the other members of the consortium doesn't thrill me. And so for those reasons, I'm going to move to approve.
Comments?
Well, I will, just say after what we experienced 2 weeks ago at this council meeting when we saw something very similar, I would just say there have been a lot of good reasons put out as to why this should pass, not only on the home side of the funds, but on the CDBG side. And so I know we have a motion out, but not everyone has had a chance to comment. So I would just encourage my colleagues that if you are leaning no, I would love to have the discussion of what can get you to a yes, because from my perspective on housing policy, this needs to be an all of the above situation. All of these categories, we're talking about home funds, we're talking about CDBG, like all of these are making a difference in different ways in the needs of our community. So let's please really consider how we can make things work for our community.
I would say, not your fault, but you're standing here now, and as he said, it's our fault, right, too? This is, every year, we get to the table and we're told, you have to do this, and I hate that. More than anything, it just infuriates me. You have to make this decision or the sky is falling. And I hate being forced in that, and every year I say the same thing, please don't put me in this. Even back to the days of our RDA funds, you have to vote for it. No, I was the only one in the state of California that said no. I don't like to be put in a position where I can't look at this every year, let's talk about our seniors. Let's get this, okay, next year, we'll do an amendment. And it never happened. Again, I'm not trying to point fingers. I'm just saying this is where we're at. And it gets really infuriating when all of a sudden, oh, well, okay, wait, we should do this. We'll just do it now. And then we'll clean it up later. And it gets really hard to talk to the public and then get told you guys are doing a failure job when we've asked for it. We wanted to spend money, and it's just the money keeps growing and we can't use it for anything because we can't amend, we can't make the right decisions. So I'm really torn because I understand litigations, but I don't like being forced. Comment?
Yeah, so I really want the home to go. I don't want to set the county up for failure, and Vito's right, they take over in 3 days. My issue is the money to TGM. There's too many things that we don't know. I think it's safe to say there's not one board member here tonight from TGM, and that's disheartening, unless Mr. Kiriako can say he sits on the board. I don't think you do, sir. Yeah, not anymore. We don't know who's on the board. There's so many unknowns of what we don't know, but we're gonna hand over another $400,000. That's my issue. But I do want to see home go because I do want our other stakeholders to be set up for success when the county does take over.
Councilmember Bixel.
Fine mess we've got into.
Amen.
It's a bitter pill.
Yeah.
It's a bitter pill. I can see all sides. It'll be interesting to see how the vote goes.
Can we do something with the CBDG, such as put some requirements before they get funding that we want to make sure that they're in good standing with the IRS, that we do know the board members and, any other requirements that council may require?
So this action tonight would be the first step. We will have to bring back to council the consideration to actually approve the agreement between the city and Gospel Mission that would actually fund it. So, we can.
So we can put some parameters on that, making sure that before there's a dollar given out, they have to make sure that they are in compliance with our requirements.
Yes. Yeah, so if there are those items that for sure now, we can have those to look to include them or moving forward, but this would come back before council in the form of agreements. So at that time as well, to make a decision.
So there are safeguards in place to not, again, in some ways, I feel like we're throwing good money after bad.
Yeah.
So we would be able within the CDBG agreement to put some parameters around this portion of the funding, the $387,000 in that agreement, and I would work with our city attorney to help in that contract and language.
Mr. Wilson?
Well, my suggestion would be that we write a contract with TGM that specifies the things we're concerned about and need to know about. And we should ask at the same time in that contract that they provide us a list of their board of directors. We should also ask at the same time that they continue to make sure that the storage facility that we built, on their behalf is used for storage and not for other purposes. I think we can ask for them to be clear that if we move forward with remodeling that facility, that they're not going to have a say in any change orders or any change or modifications of the project, that those are all incumbent upon the city of Turlock. If they choose to want to make changes, then we'll do that at the city level, not at the Turlock Hospital Mission level. So those are the things I would incorporate into an agreement between us and them.
So to that point, the estimated or guesstimated 400,000, can you put a specific amount? If all those things are met that you've just mentioned, I'd rather know exactly what it's gonna cost. I don't like, a change order is gonna have to come through anyway, unless, of course, it's within your parameter. But I just think that willy-nilly is not gonna get us anywhere, and we don't do it on anything else. So why are we doing it here? Because we're establishing a precedent that is ugly.
Well, we have an estimate of $387,000.
Right.
Yeah, that is,
estimate.
that's
An
a,
estimate,
that's a
okay.
Not a bid.
That is a bid that was
Okay.
provided by the
So
contractor.
400 doesn't
So it is a
make
bid.
sense.
It's a bid,
Is the bid based on plans?
yes,
Real plans?
approved,
Done plans?
stamped
Okay.
plans.
So then 400 is not
Yes.
383 or whatever.
Right.
Right, so why are we just putting cushion, saying here, fix, go ahead and start bringing stuff? That's not what we do in anything else.
So fine, we'll make it 387 based on the plan.
But don't we just passed, a few months ago, our means of doing things is to include a contingency, because as, builders, things come up, right? The
include
fixture that we got bid on is not available. We have to sub it out for something that's gonna be more expensive. So I feel like to prevent us from having to come back for an extra $35,000 to rehash all of this, or whatever it is, the difference between $370,000, 280 versus $400,000, I think 400 is appropriate.
Well, that money just stays in that particular fund, correct? Because we're paying the bills. They
Correct.
submit an invoice, the contractor submits an invoice, we pay the bill.
Right.
Turlock Gospel Mission never gets the actual funding. We have control of all the money.
That's right.
That is
Okay.
correct.
So
And
if we do not use all of the money that's there, then it stays in that particular fund that we could use for something else in the same, so if another facility needed the money, the $30,000, then we could utilize that in another thing. This doesn't just go to it's not a check to Turlock Gospel Mission.
no, it would be,
I would just interrupt and note that there is included in the price is a contingency already built into it.
In the 380 something.
Yes.
It's part of the bid.
Madam Clerk, we have a motion on the floor, right?
We do. There's no second.
I will second.
Okay. We have a motion to approve everything. Is that correct? Yes. And a second. Will you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Abram,
Yes.
Councilmember Bixel,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Franco.
Yes.
Councilmember Moniz.
Yes.
Mayor Bublak.
No, and it passes 4-1. Thank you for that. City manager updates?
Well, since we're on the topic of housing tonight,
We are.
I just want to bring you up to date on the plans to build a facility out at the Corporation Yard for the homeless. It seems that HCD is changing their rules. What they want to fund is only permanent housing, not transitional housing. So we're going to have some more conversations with them, but in my opinion, if that's where their stand is, then we're going to have to rethink what we're going to do with that
I definitely want to
type
come
of
back.
facility. Right,
May I ask a question about that?
sure.
In the original NOFA, I believe the application period for home key funds ended at the end of July, right? So is it the expectation that an alternate plan will come back with home key funds, or are we going to have to search out a different funding source?
Well, my belief is that the Home Key will do another funding cycle after this one's over, because it's like the
times a year.
third one that they've done so far. So we would look to see what they come up in terms of other funding sources or a new funding source for Home Key. Not in the next 30 days.
Anything else? No? All right. Council items for future consideration? Anything?
Yeah. Just one. I think we seriously need to look at a policy when we are giving away CDBG funds and HEAP funds and Cheeto funds, that we don't have some sort of checklist to make sure that these nonprofits are in compliance with the IRS and the Attorney General and the state of California, and who is sitting on the board, and has anybody that's in charge of money ever filed bankruptcy? And if so, how many bankruptcies have they filed? And there's just so much information that we don't have, and we are handing out an awful lot of money with very little oversight, and I think we need to develop some type of policy to rectify that.
I like that. And I would hope that that would be on, if whatever we agree upon would be on every agenda packet. Whatever CDBG, whatever we do, it'd always be right there. You'd have to go through the cycle.
We can do that.
Okay. And then I want us to have code enforcement, police, and probably building look into structures, the definition. It's unfair to us that pay taxes to go by and have structures made up, shanties, if you will, by people who can't afford. But there's still, if I had a fire, you would red tag my house and say it's uninhabitable. So we need to be fair and equal in looking at that. And I'd like to have something come back so that we can actually, do a citation or something. They're unsafe to be living in them. I know I just passed one on Golden State today, and I thought, what the heck? So if we can make it fair to the taxpayers and to everyone, because there are places to lay your head. You don't need to be making these shanties that are uninhabitable. And in fact, in the joint meeting, the gentleman talked about safe and sanitary homes. Well, those aren't. So it was kind of interesting that was one of the categories that you have to look at. So I'm interested in having some dialogue about that in the future. Is there any comments?
I have an announcement that the Ad hoc Committee on Cannabis is having our public meeting on this Thursday, the 29th at 6 o'clock. It is, again, myself, Councilmember Bix. Yes, right here in this room. It's been noticed. We will be receiving a presentation from our cannabis consultant who will be leading us through discussion on different policy topics that the committee will discuss. And then ultimately, it's unclear as to how many meetings we will be having, but eventually, we will be bringing back things for this council to consider.
Anybody else?
Third Thursday was fun. Be sure to attend the next one in July. Parade. This 4th of July parade is actually on the 1st of July on Saturday. It'll be a lot of fun. Yeah, we know it's going to be hot, so dress accordingly and drink water. And happy, safe, and sane 4th of July. Don't shoot off illegal fireworks, please. My dog would love you if you didn't.
There's big fines now for that.
And then finally, the George Piro event will be on July 5th, and it will be at the Civic Club. And if you want to get tickets still, it's growing fast, and we're going to have to cut it off soon. But you can get a hold of it through the city clerk. And Madam Clerk, it is your time to tell us about the closed session.
Yes, for closed session, item 12A, conference with labor negotiators. Agency designated representative is Deputy City Manager Sarah Eddy, and the employee organization is the Turlock Firefighters Association, Local 2434. Item 12B is conference with legal counsel. Anticipated litigation, potential cases is 1.
All right, we will report out should there be something.
what? There it goes. Hey, we are back from closed session with nothing to report. We are adjourned. Thank you.